I'm going to talk a little bit about the people's genome in a slightly different way, but first I want to start with a standard sociological observation in which sociologists looking at American culture have documented what they identify as an extraordinary sense of isolation, autonomy, and independent decision-making in middle-class American culture. But it is an independent decision-making which is, in fact, synchronized. So there's a kind of synchronized outcome, shared belief, patterns of behavior, but the individuals who are making those decisions are under the, have the perspective that they are making that decision in complete isolation as independent and autonomous actors. And so it's this kind of synchronized results and outcomes that are understood as entirely privatized and solitary. Much of the research has focused on the experience of love, which is almost a choreographed, socially determined experience, but there's also been work on religious salvation and also on the experience of therapy as a sort of a communal experience. Everyone thinks they're doing it all by themselves, but they do it in the shared way. So I'm interested in these synchronized and solitary experiences, and I want to suggest that perhaps being in the world of genomic medicine may have some qualities like that, a sense of being solitary and also of synchronized outcomes, synchronized beliefs, synchronized behavior patterns. And I'm going to use a term that I picked up in a cystic fibrosis listserv. I've been working on the history of cystic fibrosis, but I've also been looking at contemporary management of cystic fibrosis, at the cystic fibrosis clinic at Penn, how do patients think about it, how do clinicians think about it. And on the listserv, there was a debate about gene therapy for CF, in which one participant referred to all of them on the listserv as operating on the bleeding edge of research, that they were persons on the bleeding edge. Listening to all the talks today, I started to think about who's on the bleeding edge of the genomics revolution today in 2010. And some of the people who showed up in our discussions, well, first of all, there are populations all over the globe. There was kind of a persistent theme that we needed to be paying attention not only to the United States, but to people in other locations who are enrolled in these systems. So there are populations all over the globe. There are persons who are marked by race, who are identified as a part of particular racial groups, and their racial status is a part of their value to genomics, to contemporary biotechnology. There are the frozen ones, which we didn't really talk about, but I'm interested in people who are dead and who are still in these databases. Their DNA is still available, and they're still in a way on the bleeding edge. They're persons who matter for any sense we want to make of these systems, because there are issues that emerge as a result of their being frozen in time and moved into the future in a way. They're available to a system in which they played no role. There are also, in a different way, those yet to be born, that is in perpetuity. They're on the bleeding edge because one of the stakes that we have is in thinking about that future. Who is vulnerable in the future to these systems? Furthermore, there are, in the contemporary culture, the donors, the surrogates, everybody in that system in which materials are being traded, shared, sold, eggs and sperm and wombs and things that are for rent in this commercial network. So these people are on this bleeding edge that we're thinking about. There are all the parents to be, and I sympathize with the notion that to be a parent, to be on the verge of being a parent in 2010 is a pretty challenging prospect because of the ways that standard of care has emerged. What do you have to tell parents? What kind of information do you have to provide to them? What are they supposed to know about their potential offspring or their prospects for reproduction? So I put them on the edge. There are people told about unknown and unknowable things, and one of the things I see at Penn is that there can be a tendency to share information with vulnerable people, people who might become sick, people who have a certain allele or they're carrying a certain mutation, who can then be given information which by any stretch is not particularly informative. And so they're getting information, they're on this edge and they're getting information that they can't really use, and the person's giving them the information can't really tell them how to use it either. And they're also on the bleeding edge. It's hard to know what to make of such information. There's also all the consumers of DNA tests of various kinds. So there's the people who buy direct-to-consumer DNA testing for disease. There are the people who buy it for ancestry. There are even people like myself. This summer I joined the Coriell Personalized Medicine Registry. The interesting thing about the Coriell Registry is that it, in fact, is not a study of DNA or of genes. It's a study of human behavior. And the point of Coriell is to figure out whether people, if they're told that their DNA predicts heart disease, will they be any better at behaving than if they're told by their doctor that they're at risk of heart disease because of their parents. So it's really a sociological study of what people do when they get genetic information. And so there's ancestry, health, and then there are the people who have genetic diseases, their families, and their children. Now, my question is, when I list all these people on the bleeding edge, is who do we stand with? Are these the people we stand with? And is that where our stakes are? Is that what our alliances are like? One of the things that came up in many of the discussions was the notion that the public is somehow in need of greater information. And I would use a different word. I would say they may be in need of greater resources or more allies, and that part of what we can do as a group is to work in alliance with the persons who are most vulnerable, who are inside this system, who have many, many stakes in the system. They have an investment in the system that I respect. I cannot be utterly cynical about genomic medicine because I know too much about it, and I know how it works, and I know how many people gain from it. And so how do we move forward in a way that respects both the stakes of all these people, the legitimate stakes, and that also gives them allies with them and gives them more power? If we think about the possible global consequences of the intervention that we're trying to formulate or craft here in this meeting, that would be a great one. Now, I can't believe that I'm almost out of time, so I'll just say I have, wait, one final comment. Okay, I can't say half what I wanted to say, but here's what I'll say. I have been wearing the entire meeting. I'm a historian, and I have been wearing a Fitter Families Medal from the American Eugenics Society. This belonged to the widow of Charles Davenport, and John Marks got a lot of them some time ago. Years ago, he showed up in my office, and he gave me a Fitter Family Medal, so I consider myself to be fitter. Thank you very much.